Hello and welcome to our Monday Night Bible Study. We are starting a brand new series about this is the life of Jesus. This is more a biography of Jesus. This is not going to get into a lot of the teachings. I will talk about how some of the travels and the miracles and all that stuff fit together in a timeline. But it is not going to be about the teachings of Jesus so much as it is to get us an idea of what the movements were, what happened, where they happened, where these, things like that interest me because I think that it's important to understand the people that Jesus is talking to, the area, the geography, the culture in which some of the things happen. If you're in a place, if you grow up in the mountains of Colorado, you've never seen the ocean, and so you may not understand, how big, seemingly endless an ocean is. If you grow up on the coast, you may have never seen mountains, and so I think sometimes we try to move Jesus and put him into where we are. And our culture, and try to force our culture on the things that he did, and it can make for some awkward situations. Also, we have a tendency to read snippets and stories of the life of Jesus, and not really be able to place them on a timeline where this happened. Was the woman at the well before or after the calling of Matthew? All of these things. And so we're gonna go kind of basically trace the life and ministry of Jesus from the birth to the crucifixion and the ascension as a biography, more than as a teaching thing. It's not going to be a long series, probably 5 to 6 weeks, and we'll just walk through the timeline together. I will say I'm going to rely mostly on the timeline of the book of Luke. Luke is probably the most traditional biography that we have of Jesus. The other timelines can get jumbled because they're more memories of the individual. Luke says in his introduction to Theophilus that it is he interviews a lot of different eyewitnesses, and he tries to set all of the stories that happen in order. And so I'm going to take Luke at his word with that. Now there's stories that are in Matthew, stories that are in Mark that don't appear in Luke, and so we're gonna weave all that together, hopefully, into something relatively coherent. So, at this time, the known world, of course, is ruled by the Roman Empire. Rome rules from here all the way over into what they call Gaul, Spain, up into France, down into North Africa, all the way over into Asia Minor, and of course, the Middle East, this area. This is during a time known as the Pax Romana. This is the peace of Rome. It lasts roughly 200 years, from around 27 BC to around 180 AD. And by the peace of Rome, of course, I mean it is very peaceful if you are a Roman. If you're willing to keep your nose to the grindstone, you're willing to do exactly what you're told, not get too independent, not think too much for yourself. Pay your taxes, don't cause trouble, don't stir up problems. It's not bad. If Rome starts getting wind that there's some trouble stirring, their retribution is swift and it is overwhelming. And they will. There are stories during the time of Jesus. We're going to get to some of the stories when Pontius Pilate puts down a seeming revolt, a tax revolt. You don't mess with, you don't poke the bear, because they will burn down your city, tear down the walls. I mean, they will destroy everything if you mess with them. In fact, it is in 70 AD that Titus comes in to Jerusalem. This is during the Pax Romana, during the Peace of Rome, and basically wipes the city of Jerusalem off the map because they rebelled against Rome, and you didn't do that. This is a time that Rome is not expanding a lot, so there are some foreign wars, but they're mostly to establish borders. So in the empire, they're building roads, they're building mail systems, they're building entertainment, they're building trade systems, and so you have a lot of you've got a lot of contact with cultures that are very far afield and outside where you are. This is why Paul is able to travel relatively freely all around the Roman Empire, maybe even eventually going over into Spain. There's some debate about that. This is why the church can spread. This is why Paul can send his letters to different places, because you have this period of, again, it's relative peace. It's certainly more peaceful if you mind everybody and obey the rules. So it's a good time. It's a good time to be a Roman citizen, especially in the city of Rome. It was a tolerable time to be a Roman subject. And if you're poor, you really didn't notice that much what was going on. My grandpa told me one time, he said during the Depression, he said, we was poor. We didn't know there was a depression going on. We didn't have nothing before and we didn't have nothing after. So when you're a peasant during this time, it's just a different fellow that's mad at you because you're not producing enough. Judea during this time, and this is the area of the Middle East that we talk about, is controlled mostly. It's controlled by the Roman Empire, but in a couple of different ways. So the area to the north, which is called Syria, and the area to the south, of course, Egypt, are governed by kings. So they are governed directly by the Roman Empire. The middle of that area, Judea, is ruled by Herod the Great. Now, Herod the Great is a friend of Rome. So it's not directly controlled by Rome, but you're gonna do what Rome tells you to do, and you're not gonna fuss too much about it. Palestine is not really an important place in itself, but it is important because if you're going to go, the best way to get from the Syrian provinces in the north to the Egyptian provinces in the south is through Palestine. You've got the Jordan River that you can move stuff up and down. You've got relatively established road networks and all that stuff. Otherwise, you've got to go through a wilderness area that is to the east of Palestine, to the east of Judea. And so, you don't want to do that. So it's the easiest trade route. And so Rome has armies and legions stationed to the north and stationed to the south. Palestine, we don't really have a legion there, but nod, nod, wink, wink. If you're okay, if you don't cause much trouble, we'll be fine. This worked well until the end of Herod the Great's reign, when Herod the Great died in about 4 BC. Then Rome ended up splitting the kingdom because there was some fussing amongst his kids about who should get what. Rome ended up splitting the kingdom up between some different tetrarchs, and we're going to get to some of that eventually. So, in about the sixth, this is from the book of Luke. We get our first scripture. In the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent from God to a city in Galilee named Nazareth, to a virgin betrothed to a man whose name was Joseph, of the house of David, and the virgin's name was Mary. Now, I didn't think to put Nazareth on the map well, but just for information, Nazareth is roughly in this area on the southwestern side of the Sea of Galilee. Capernaum's up here. Nazareth is down here. Jerusalem is down in this area. So the angel comes to Mary and says, "You're going to have a baby." Mary says, "I'm not going to have a baby," for obvious reasons. The angel says, "Oh no, you are, and it's going to be okay." And so Mary then, after she is told this, Mary then goes down to the hill country of Judah. In those days, Mary arose and went with haste into the hill country, a town in Judah, and she entered in the house of Zechariah and greeted Elizabeth. And when Elizabeth heard the greeting of Mary, the baby leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. So Mary, again, is here in Nazareth, goes down to Judea and into the hill country of Judea. Remember that Jesus would be Jesus's cousin. John the Baptist would be Jesus's cousin. And so Mary goes to her relative's house, probably an aunt or maybe an older sister, goes to her relative's house. She is, Elizabeth is also pregnant. Her husband is one of the priests in the temple. And so one of the ministers in the temple. And she's pregnant with a child. Mary goes down to see her. They greet, and so Mary ends up in Judea at this time. Mary then goes back after this greeting, after this story. She goes back to Nazareth, and then, as happens in those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This was the first registration when Quirinius was the governor of Syria. And all went to be registered, each into his own town. And Joseph also went up from Galilee, town of Nazareth, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and the lineage of David. Excuse me. So Joseph, actually, in this slide, is going to be used again. So we'll see this. Joseph, again, goes from Bethlehem here down to Jerusalem to be registered, because as with today, governments like taxes and they like their money. And so they have to tax people. They tax based on population, because they figure if you have this many people, you should be able to produce this many things. And so the Roman government wants to tax based on the population of the people. And the way that you discover the population of the people is not necessarily where they are now, but where they were born. So since Joseph was from the house of David, Joseph has to go to register in Bethlehem, because in this area is where people from the different clans were supposed to be. So this is where this is obviously where Jesus is born. This is where the shepherds are, and it is interesting. This is one of the reasons I wanted to do this. So you see a picture like this. This is the hillside in Bethlehem. And so it's not really a desert necessarily, but it's also not lush green pastures. This little structure here would have been one of the structures that the shepherds would have stayed in while they were out at night with the flocks. And so the shepherds would have had a little hut area. They weren't just, out under the stars most of the time. They would have had a camp that they could have been in. This is another, I went through that picture. This is what is currently the Church of the Nativity. This is where tradition holds that Jesus was born, and this is the manger in the Church of the Nativity, where they say traditionally where Jesus was laid. And so they go from the northern part of Israel down from Nazareth to Bethlehem, and Jesus is born. Now, after Jesus is born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, now we're in Matthew, wise men from the east come to Jerusalem, saying, where is he that was born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose, and have come to worship him. And when Herod heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Now Herod is troubled because Herod is king of the Jews. And so Herod knows that the messianic prophecies are going to say there's going to be a Messiah come. The Messiah is going to depose the existing kings, He's going to destroy their lineage, and he's going to take the throne, and everybody's going to serve him. Herod does not want this to happen because Herod's got it pretty good. Herod is the king, and so Herod doesn't want the Messiah. So you kind of think, everybody's looking forward to Jesus coming back. No, everybody's not. The people that are going to be upset by it, the people that are going to be moved out of their position by Jesus coming the first time or Jesus coming the second time, they're not real excited about Jesus. They're not real excited about the Messiah coming in, and so Herod is a little upset about this. Also, Jerusalem is upset about this because, again, remember, this is during a period of time when if you rose up against Rome very violently pushed you back down. And so Jerusalem is doing pretty good. They've got their gigantic temple that's being built. Herod is a horrible person. Herod is murders people and has murdered his wife and has murdered his children and Herod has done terrible things, right? Herod's not a good guy. But if you're friends with Herod, if you're the high priest and your buddies and you do what Herod said, you live a pretty good life. And so all Jerusalem is disturbed by this because they don't want their apple cart upset either. So they depart. The wise men depart, the wise men go to visit. The wise men go to visit Jesus in Bethlehem because, interestingly, let me go back to me. Interestingly, Herod asks all of his Bible scholars, where is the Messiah going to be born? And they say, this is where he's going to be born. This is, they have all the information, but they don't go there. Right? They're not going to look for him. They should have been able to see the star just like the guys from the east did. They should have been able to see it. They should have been able to read the signs, but they knew all the stuff, but they were just looking in the wrong place. They tell Herod it's going to be Bethlehem. Herod tells the wise men, when you get there, come back and tell me that you found him because I want to go worship him too. Nod, nod, wink, wink. The wise men go, they worship Jesus. By this time, Jesus is in a house. This is probably, it's not the night of the birth, right? It's not the wise men and the shepherds all there at the same time, probably. But it's shortly after the birth. The wise men go to Jesus. I'm going to say this is after, the timeline is going to be Jesus is born. The shepherds are there that night. 8 days later, they get into a house at some point. 8 days later, they take Jesus to the temple. Jesus is circumcised. Then they come back, and the wise men show up. When the wise men leave, when they've departed, the angel of the Lord appears to Joseph in a dream and says, "Rise, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child and destroy him." And he rose and took the child and his mother by night and departed to Egypt and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what the Lord had said, "Out of Egypt have I called my son." So they will leave Nazareth here. They go down into Egypt. We don't really know where they went into Egypt. This shows them going all the way into Upper Egypt. They may have stopped. Tradition, there's like 4 or 5 different spots along this route that tradition says that they stayed. They stay here until the death of Herod, which, Herod dies in 4 BC. And so they may have stayed a year. They may have stayed a couple of years. They probably used the monies that the wise men had brought, the gold, frankincense, and myrrh, to support themselves while they're here. And then they return and they go back to Nazareth. And then we get one of the only childhood stories that we get of Jesus in the canonical Gospels. So his parents go to Jerusalem every year at the Feast of Passover. And when he was 12, they went up according to custom, like they usually do. And when the feast was ended, as they were returning, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, and his parents didn't know it. But supposing him to be in the group, they went a day's journey. They began to search for him among their relatives and acquaintances, but when they didn't find him, they returned to Jerusalem searching for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. And when his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said, "Son, why have you treated us so? Behold, your father and I have been searching for you in great distress." And he said, "Why are you looking for me? Did you not know that I must be in my father's house?" And they did not understand the saying that he spoke to them. And he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was submissive to them. And his mother treasured all these things up in her heart. And Jesus increased in knowledge and in stature and in favor, with God and man. Jesus, this is kind of the only little glimpse that we get of Jesus between his birth and the start of his public ministry. So in Mark chapter 1, Mark starts with John the Baptist. So now we're in Mark chapter 1 and verse 9 by the time you get to Jesus. So Mark skips a bunch of stuff. Mark chapter 1 and verse 9, "In those days Jesus came from Nazareth of Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan. And when he came up out of the water, immediately he saw the heavens being torn open and the Spirit descending on him like a dove. And a voice came from heaven, 'You're my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased.' The Spirit immediately drove him out into the wilderness, and he was in the wilderness 40 days being tempted by Satan, and he was with the wild animals, and the angels were ministering to him." This is pretty typical of John. This is pretty typical of the Gospel of Mark. Mark is probably the earliest gospel written, but Mark is very to the point. There's a pretty good chance that Mark is a dictation from Peter to John Mark. And so this is generally kind of traditionally viewed as Peter's recounting of the story. And Peter, it's very abrupt. It's a very, immediately we're going, everything's moving quick story. And so, you can tell, hopefully one of the things you'll be able to tell throughout this series is a difference in style between the different writers of the gospel. Matthew took a whole bunch of verses to tell his story. And Mark, this is what happened. There's not even a record of what happened in the wilderness in Mark. Mark is just, let's move, let's go. But Jesus leaves Nazareth when he's about 30 years old and goes to be baptized by John the Baptist. There are a couple of kind of traditional places. So he goes, Nazareth is here, Bethany is here. There is also a Bethany that is down in this area. So this is the traditional northern site of the baptism of Jesus. Bethany beyond the Jordan. This is in the Jordan River. This is a place that people kind of think this is where Jesus was baptized. But as I said, there's the northern part, Bethany beyond the Jordan, and then there's the southern Bethany. This is where Mary and Martha and Lazarus live, is in this Bethany. So it could have been, he could have been baptized in either place. We're not really sure. I kind of lean toward the northern site, but just to give us some idea, and I'm going to get more into the geography later, but to give us an idea of kind of the layout and everything that we're going to be talking about. The Jordan River is here. It runs from the Sea of Galilee down into the Dead Sea. Jerusalem is here. Jesus spends a lot of time. This is Galilee up here. So Jesus spends a lot of time here. There's Capernaum, Tyre, Sidon, Nazareth is over here. Bethsaida is around here. The Gadarenes is around here. The Sea of Galilee, for reference, the Sea of Galilee is roughly twice the size of Lake Conroe. So for those of you who know what Lake Conroe is, roughly twice that size. For those of you who don't know what Lake Conroe is, find out how big Lake Conroe is and double it. I don't know. Google. So we've gone from the establishment of the political situation of Jesus all the way to the temptation of Jesus. Next week, we're going to get into the start of Jesus' ministry. We're going to start pulling in stories from different parts of the gospel. Hopefully this will be interesting and get us some get us some ideas of kind of what's going on and a little bit of the background. And so we're not just reading the Gospels like almost like storybooks or fairy tales. I mean, these are real people that live real lives, and they go home to real huts or palaces or whatever. And so they walk on real streets, and their real clothes wear out. And so I think we can lose sight of some of that sometimes. So hopefully this will help. Maybe not. At least it'll be short. Anyway, I love you. God loves you. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you next week. Lord bless you.